Flames crackled across the night sky as the small passenger aircraft trembled against the raging storm. The hum of the engines battled against the relentless wind, with each gust appearing to rip the plane apart. Inside the dimly lit cabin, passengers huddled in their seats, wide-eyed and anxious. Ethan Gray, a seasoned journalist chasing his next big story, gripped his notebook tightly. He had boarded this flight expecting a routine trip, but something felt off from the beginning. The unusually tense flight attendants and the pilot's crackling voice with a hint of unease signaled that something was wrong. Ethan's instincts told him this journey would be anything but ordinary. Across the aisle, Claire, a research scientist specializing in ancient artifacts, fidgeted nervously with a small leather pouch. Inside it was an object shrouded in mystery, an artifact unearthed from ruins believed to be cursed. She was on her way to deliver it to a high-profile research facility, but deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that it should have been left buried. As the plane surged forward, an ominous jolt sent overhead luggage tumbling. A terrified gasp rippled through the cabin. The pilot's voice crackled through the intercom, his words strained and laced with urgency. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing some unexpected turbulence. Please remain seated and fasten your seatbelts." Ethan exchanged a glance with Claire. "That didn't sound convincing," he muttered under his breath. Claire nodded, her fingers tightening around the pouch. Meanwhile, in the cockpit, Captain Rhodes and his co-pilot, Lisa Carter, scanned the instruments with growing concern. A faint anomaly in the navigation system had appeared shortly after takeoff, but now, the entire system was flashing warnings in rapid succession. "We've lost primary control over autopilot," Lisa reported, her voice barely hiding her panic. "Switching to manual," Rhodes responded, his grip tightening on the controls. He turned to Lisa. "What's our nearest landing option?" Lisa frowned, checking the map. "There's an abandoned airstrip a few miles south, but it's been out of use for years. The runway conditions are unknown, and there's no confirmation if the navigation lights still work. We're not left with many choices," Rhodes said grimly. "Prepare for an emergency landing." Back in the cabin, tension thickened. An elderly woman clutched a rosary, murmuring silent prayers. A businessman, sweating profusely, repeatedly checked his phone for a signal that wouldn't come. A young boy clung to his mother, his innocent eyes filled with fear. Ethan, sensing the growing unease, decided to investigate. He unbuckled his seatbelt and made his way toward the flight attendants. "Hey, something's wrong, isn't it?" he asked the lead attendant, a woman named Sarah, who wore a strained smile. "Sir, please return to your seat," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "Come on," Ethan pressed. "I can help." Before she could respond, the plane shuddered again, causing Sarah to stumble. A piercing alarm filled the cabin, sending panic spiraling through the passengers. Over the intercom, Captain Rhodes' voice came through, this time with unmasked urgency. "Brace for impact. I repeat, brace for impact." Ethan rushed back to his seat as the cabin plunged into chaos. Claire clutched the pouch, whispering frantic pleas under her breath. The artifact inside seemed to pulse with an eerie energy. "This can't be happening," she murmured. As the ground rushed closer, a single thought pulsed through Ethan's mind. What if this wasn't just a malfunction? What if they were never meant to leave the ground in the first place? The impact came suddenly, a deafening roar as the plane collided with the earth. Screams filled the air, metal groaned under pressure, and darkness enveloped everything. And then, there was silence. Ethan's eyes fluttered open to the distant sound of crackling flames and muffled cries for help. The realization hit him like a freight train. He was still alive, but the nightmare was far from over. The wreckage of the plane lay strewn across the forest floor, illuminated by the eerie flicker of flames licking the remnants of the fuselage. Smoke curled into the night sky, a silent beacon in the vast wilderness. Survivors staggered through the debris, their expressions a mixture of shock and disbelief. Some clung to one another for comfort, while others darted through the wreckage, frantically calling out for loved ones. Ethan Gray pushed himself to his feet, his body aching from the crash. The air smelled of burning fuel and wet earth, a sharp contrast to the sterile cabin they had occupied just moments before. He scanned the wreckage, his journalist's instinct kicking in despite the overwhelming horror. Claire sat nearby, still clutching the small leather pouch, her knuckles white with tension. "We need to move," Ethan said, his voice hoarse. "This fire could spread." Claire nodded, but her eyes remained fixed on the artifact in her hands. "There's something wrong, Ethan. I can feel it." Before Ethan could respond, a cry for help pierced the night. He turned and saw a man trapped under a section of the plane's wing, his leg pinned beneath the twisted metal. Without hesitation, Ethan rushed to his side, calling out for assistance. Several other survivors joined him, their fear momentarily forgotten as they worked together to free the man. Meanwhile, Captain Rhodes and Lisa Carter assessed the situation near the cockpit wreckage. Lisa wiped a streak of blood from her forehead, her eyes scanning the scattered remains of the control panel. "We're lucky we survived this at all," she murmured. "Luck had nothing to do with it," Rhodes said grimly. "Something went wrong up there, something beyond turbulence." Lisa nodded, her mind replaying the cascade of alerts flashing across the cockpit screens before impact: altitude discrepancies, system malfunctions, and an ominous message indicating critical engine failure. The navigation system failed first, then everything else followed. "It's almost like it was sabotaged." Rhodes didn't respond, but the weight of her words settled heavily between them. They both knew their first priority was survival, but questions about what had brought them down loomed like a dark cloud. In the chaos, Ethan and Claire regrouped with the others. A makeshift triage center had formed, with survivors tending to the wounded. The flight attendants did their best to maintain order, but panic simmered beneath the surface. As the survivors gathered, a sudden, distant howl echoed through the forest. Heads snapped toward the sound, eyes wide with fear. "Wolves?" someone whispered. Claire's grip on the pouch tightened. "No, something worse." Ethan followed her gaze into the darkness beyond the fire's glow, an unsettling feeling creeping over him. Whatever was out there was watching them, waiting silently in the darkness. "We need to find shelter and stay together," Rhodes commanded, taking control. "No one wanders off alone." With every step away from the burning wreckage, the survivors became increasingly aware of the grim reality they faced. They were stranded, miles from civilization, and something lurked in the shadows, drawn to their presence. As they moved deeper into the forest, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that their crash wasn't an accident. Someone, or something, wanted them here. The forest closed in around the survivors as they moved deeper into the darkness, the crackling flames of the wreckage fading behind them. Every snapping twig and distant rustle sent waves of unease through the group. Ethan walked alongside Claire, his flashlight casting erratic beams through the dense undergrowth. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being followed. "Do you think anyone's coming for us?" Claire whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. Ethan hesitated, his eyes darting toward the dark silhouettes of the trees. "I don't know, but we can't just sit and wait. We need to find higher ground and figure out where we are." Captain Rhodes led the way, his military background evident in his decisive movements. "Keep moving," he ordered. "We need to stay together." As they trudged through the uneven terrain, the howl they had heard earlier grew closer. Fear rippled through the survivors, and Claire gripped Ethan's arm tightly. "That's not a wolf," she said, her voice trembling. "I've studied animal behavior. That's something else." Lisa Carter, limping from an injury from the crash, suddenly stopped. "I think I saw something," she said, her eyes wide with terror. "Something moving between the trees." The group froze, their collective breath hitching. Ethan pointed his flashlight toward the shadows, revealing only the thick trunks of ancient trees and the endless blackness beyond. "Let's keep going," he said, trying to mask his unease. Hours passed, exhaustion setting in. They found a small clearing and decided to rest, though no one truly relaxed. Rhodes stood watch, scanning the perimeter while others huddled together for warmth. Claire finally opened the leather pouch she had been clutching so desperately. Inside, nestled among layers of cloth, was an object unlike anything Ethan had ever seen, an intricately carved stone with glowing symbols. "What is that?" Ethan asked. Claire looked at him, her face drained of color, eyes wide and filled with a mixture of fear and guilt. "It's an artifact from the ruins I was researching. The legends say it holds power. But we weren't supposed to take it." Before Ethan could respond, a low growl echoed through the clearing, resonating from the dense undergrowth beyond their flickering fire. Panic surged through the group, and Rhodes immediately barked orders. "Stay together! Weapons up if you have them!" Something moved at the edge of the clearing, just beyond the fire's glow. Eyes, several pairs of them, reflected the flickering light. A guttural snarl followed, and the survivors scrambled into a defensive circle. Ethan felt his heart pounding in his chest as he gripped a makeshift club, his journalist instincts giving way to pure survival mode. Claire's hands trembled around the artifact, the glow from the stone pulsating in sync with the approaching menace. Then, without warning, the shadows lunged. Chaos erupted as the group scrambled to fend off the unseen attackers. Screams, snarls, and the sounds of struggle filled the air. Ethan swung wildly, feeling the impact of his weapon against something solid, but the force sent him sprawling to the ground. In the frenzy, Claire clutched the artifact closer, chanting words under her breath, hoping, praying, that whatever power it held could save them. The stone flared brightly, momentarily blinding everyone around it. And just like that, the creatures vanished, retreating into the darkness as suddenly as they had appeared. Silence fell over the clearing, broken only by the survivors' ragged breaths. Rhodes knelt beside Ethan, his face grim. "We need to get out of here. Fast. Whatever they were, they'll be back." Ethan glanced at Claire, who was staring at the artifact with wide eyes. "We need to find out what this thing really is, before it's too late." The survivors gathered their belongings and pressed on, deeper into the unknown, each step bringing them closer to uncovering the truth, and whatever horrors lay ahead. The survivors pressed forward through the dense forest, the weight of exhaustion and fear heavy on their shoulders. The eerie glow of the artifact in Claire's hands provided the only source of light, sending wavering shadows creeping across the forest floor. Every step felt like an eternity, the oppressive silence broken only by their labored breathing and the distant rustling of unseen creatures. Ethan's mind raced with questions. What was this artifact, and why did it draw those monstrous entities from the shadows? He cast a glance at Claire, who clutched it tightly, her expression a mixture of determination and dread. "We need to get rid of that thing," Lisa whispered, wincing from the pain in her injured leg. "It's like a beacon." "No," Claire shot back, her voice firm. "It's the only thing keeping us alive. Whatever's out there is afraid of it. We can't leave it behind." Rhodes nodded grimly. "She's right. But we need to find a way to use it, not just carry it around like dead weight." Before anyone could respond, a bone-chilling howl echoed through the trees, closer this time. Panic surged through the group. Rhodes raised his hand, signaling everyone to stay quiet. They huddled together, eyes scanning the shadows. Suddenly, something crashed through the underbrush, surging toward them with alarming swiftness. Ethan barely had time to react before a towering figure lunged at them from the darkness. Instinct took over, and he swung his flashlight, striking the creature in the face. It recoiled with an inhuman shriek, but more shapes closed in around them. Claire, instinctively, held up the artifact. Its glow intensified, sending out a pulse of energy that drove the creatures back, their snarls turning to pained wails. "It's working!" she shouted. "Keep moving!" Rhodes barked, ushering everyone forward. "Don't stop!" They ran, pushing through branches and tangled roots, the artifact's glow lighting their way. The creatures pursued them relentlessly, their glowing eyes visible in the darkness. Just when it seemed they couldn't run any further, they stumbled into a clearing, an ancient ruin, partially buried beneath the forest growth. "In there!" Ethan pointed to a crumbling archway. The group rushed inside, the walls of the ruin offering a brief reprieve from the pursuit. Claire placed the artifact on a pedestal in the center of the room, and immediately, the ground trembled beneath them. Symbols on the walls began to glow, bathing the space in an eerie blue light. "What is this place?" Lisa gasped, clutching her side. Claire traced her fingers over the inscriptions. It's a temple, or a sanctuary of some kind. This artifact belongs here. We were never meant to take it. Ethan exhaled sharply, realization dawning. We need to return it. That's the only way to stop this. Before they could act, a deafening roar filled the chamber as the largest of the creatures burst through the archway. Rhodes fired his last remaining flare, momentarily blinding it. Claire, with shaking hands, placed the artifact into a carved slot on the pedestal. A surge of energy erupted through the ruin, sending everyone sprawling to the ground. The creatures shrieked in agony as the energy engulfed them, their forms disintegrating into mist. Silence fell once more, the oppressive darkness lifting. Ethan helped Claire to her feet, both of them staring at the now dormant artifact. We did it, he whispered. Rhodes nodded, his face grim but relieved. Let's find a way out of here. We're not safe yet. As they emerged from the ruins, the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, bathing the forest in an ethereal glow. The survivors walked on, their ordeal far from over, but a newfound sense of hope guiding their way.